Hi, Captain Peter Cutsey. Today's briefing is approach to stall recovery. Let's just have a look at the Flight Crew Training Manual. An approach to stall is a controlled flight maneuver. A stall is an out of control but recoverable condition. However, the recovery maneuver is the same for either an approach to a stall or a fully developed stall. What we'll be doing in this briefing and the sim session that we supposedly would be doing together would be an approach to stall. So the objective of the approach to stall or stall recovery training is to familiarize the pilot with the stall warning and correct recovery techniques. Recent safety studies have shown that an increasing number of stall-related accidents have occurred during the maneuvering and approach phases of flight. In an effort to reduce this trend, training emphasis has shifted to performing stall or stall recovery exercises in the phases of flight that we'll talk about. The maneuver should be done under simulated instrument conditions. So we're going to be in cloud, and your instructor will make sure that you're in cloud for these recoveries with the autopilot engaged. So the stalls that we'll be looking at are high level, above 20,000, low level, a level off type stall, a turning base type stall, and an ILS final approach stall. The autopilot slowly establishes a pitch attitude by using stabilizer trim or elevator position to induce the stall buffet or shaker. During the initial stages of the stall, local airflow separation results in buffeting, giving a natural warning of an approach to stall. And you'll see this in the simulator. The stall warning should be readily identifiable by the pilot, either by initial buffet indication or an artificial indication, such as the stick shaker. So you want to first be able to recognize and confirm that you actually are approaching a stall. Stall warning or stick shaker, or buffeting, which could be heavy, lack of pitch authority, lack of roll control, inability to arrest the descent rate. So all of these could be combined. I have a little picture here of the airspeed tape on the PFD on the 737 NG. And a tool that is amazing on this airplane is the speed trend. So this little green arrow is indicating here in this particular case that you'll be at a speed of 120 knots within 10 seconds. So if you're stable in flight, you shouldn't see an arrow. If the arrow is increasing, it means that your speed will increase and be at the tip of the arrow within 10 seconds. So you should be observing this at all times. We'll talk about three critical angles that you should understand, and I'll point them out to you when we are in the simulator. They are a pitch angle and a flight path angle and an angle of attack. There's a good picture here that you can have a look at, and we'll try to explain it to you, but the pitch angle is basically the pitch of the aircraft with respect to the horizon. Your flight path angle is the angle that the aircraft is actually making with the horizon. For instance, if you were at 179,015 kilos on takeoff at a higher altitude airport at a hot temperature of, let's say, plus 40, you'll pitch up to 15 degrees on takeoff, but your actual flight path angle, because of weight and thrust, etc., will be considerably less. It could be as little as 10 degrees. Another way to explain flight path angle is when you're on an ILS, a 3-degree glide slope, the ILS is basically a -3 path below the horizon. Whereas you could be pitched up to 1.75, let's say for all intents purposes, let's use the example, you could be pitched up to 2 degrees at flaps 30 on final approach. So if your pitch is +2 and your angle, flight path angle, is -3, you have a difference of 5 degrees. That difference is your angle of attack. We're going to do 3 types of stalls today. We're actually going to start off with high-level stalls. We'll talk about those later. But in the session, once we've done the high-level stall, we'll come back and do the low-level stalls. The level-off stall setup, I'll set up the aircraft, and basically it'll be as follows. I'll reposition the aircraft to 10,000 feet. And will be clean at flaps up speed with the autopilot auto throttle engaged. I'll give you a clearance to descend to 9,000 feet, and I'll ask you to expedite descent. Level change and speed brakes, thrust lever closed, level change, speed brakes, and I will disconnect the auto throttles. I'm going to ask the crew, I'll ask you to leave the speed brakes extended on level off for the entry to the approach to stall. That's training only, so that you go through the proper recovery. And I'll also ask you to go through to the stick shaker for training only. You should never, ever be below the bug. This is a training exercise. Ensure that the crew would normally take an action at the first recognition of any symptom of instability. All right, so like I say, this is for training only. As we're approaching the stall, here are a couple of pickies that I've given you here. The top of the amber band, when you're actually halfway through the amber band, you will get a flashing box around your airspeed. And in some 737s, you get an oral warning, airspeed low, airspeed low. If you notice, there's the trend vector indicating what your speed is going to be in 10 seconds. And here we are just touching the stick shaker speed warning, and you'll get the stick shaker. That's when you will begin your recovery. Hold the control column firmly. Disengage the autopilot and the auto throttle, and smoothly apply nose down elevator. That is, you're unloading. So nose down elevator to reduce the angle of attack until there's no buffet or shaker. Nose down stabilizer trim may be needed. And you'll find later when we talk about the high level recovery, you will be using stabilizer trim. Roll the shortest direction to wings level if needed. Add thrust levers as required. I should say advanced thrust levers as required. Then retract the speed brakes. And then do not change gear or flap configuration except during liftoff. If you're taking off and you have flaps up and you encounter stick shaker, call for flaps 1. Check airspeed and adjust thrust as needed. Establish a pitch attitude. And return to the desired flight path. Re-engage the autopilot and auto throttle if desired. This recovery procedure is in the QR8. We'll have a quick look at it later. Word for word. here are a couple of pickies of 3 instances in the recovery. So you're recovering. If you notice the speed trend arrow increasing, if you notice you happen to be at 5 degrees of pitch above the horizon, and the speed is increasing, and you're stabilized, and your pitch is still the same, and you're now under better conditions and accelerating. So these are just a sample. 5 degrees of pitch is not necessarily the pitch that you're going to be using. You'll use whatever pitch reference that is required to terminate the stick shaker or the buffet. So I'm not going to teach you 5 degrees of pitch. It so happens that in this particular instance, it's a good target to start shooting for. The most important thing is to smoothly apply nose down elevator. Okay, so that is the level off stall. Turning base stall, I'll position you downwind on radar vectors at flaps 5, all autoflight systems engaged. And then I'll disengage the auto throttle. And as the speed approaches the top of the maneuvering speed band, I'll assign you a heading for base leg, which will be a 90-degree turn. And you're to recover on the stick shaker just as we discussed before. Same recovery. Hold the control column firmly, disengage the autopilot and auto throttle, and very smoothly, that's the secret, pitch down to a pitch above the horizon that will eliminate the stick shaker or buffet. Nose down stabilizer trim may be needed. Roll the shortest direction to wings level if needed. Advance thrust levers as needed. Do not change gear or flap configuration. Check airspeed and adjust thrust as needed. Establish pitch attitude. Return to the desired flight path that is back to the altitude that you were supposed to be at on vectors, and re-engage the autopilot and auto throttle as desired. The ILS final approach, I'll set you up on final at 6 miles, configured for landing. Gear down and flaps 30. Set the weather to 2,600 feet, RVR, and a ceiling of 200 feet. In other words, you're going to be in IFR conditions. I'll unfreeze the airplane and I will disconnect the auto throttle. Recover as before, but make sure that you recover from the stall first before a GPWS oral. You can't recover from a GPWS if you're not unstalled. So ensure that you unstall the airplane first and accelerate to VREF while climbing. So enough thrust or climb to also allow you to accelerate to VREF. Initially, pushing up the thrust lever, the aircraft will pitch up. You'll have to pitch down and trim so that you still have a rate of climb and the airspeed is increasing to VREF. When you get to VREF, then you would execute the normal go-around procedure. So that shouldn't be level off, that should be the ILS. Hold the control column firmly, disengage the autopilot and auto throttle, apply nose down, unload as you did before, and do not change gear or flap. Adjust pitch, attitude, and thrust to achieve a climb while accelerating to VREF. How much? Enough thrust to allow you to climb and at the same time accelerate. What I would advise you, depending on your weight, is a 500 foot per minute climb will in most cases allow your airspeed to accelerate. So once you're at VREF, initiate the go-around procedure, not until you're at VREF, which will involve cleaning up the airplane as per the go-around procedure, and re-engage the autopilot and autothrottle if desired. So that's pretty well it. The QRH reference is here, and we follow that directly with what you saw on the slides. Pilot monitoring will monitor the altitude and airspeed, verify that all actions have been done, and call out any omissions, and call out any trend towards terrain contact. And again, to monitor altitude, etc. And set the flap lever as directed, or set the gear as directed when at the right time in the recovery, as we have been talking about. Well, that's it for this. I hope you enjoyed the briefing. If you want a live briefing online with your sim partner, give me a call. Telephone number is on screen, and my email address is on screen, and I'll gladly do it at no cost to share my experience and give you a good briefing using Zoom. So both of you, and we could log on together and do it if you want, especially if you're coming on and getting a type rating. Thank you.